Hello, welcome once again to this ongoing lecture series on Sudha Murty's Wise and Otherwise. In the previous lecture, I completed anecdote number 30 all the way till 35. This is in continuation to the previous lecture. I'll be taking up chapter number 36 and I'll be taking the next 5 chapters from chapter 36 till chapter 40. I believe that till now the readers would have got a great idea about some of the major themes, some of the major tropes that Sudha Murty has been picking up in her particular in this particular book, Wise and Otherwise, right? So in continuation to those lectures, let me go on to story number 36 and till story number 40. This is Piyush Chaudhary. I'm assistant professor at the Department of English. I welcome you all once again. Let's talk about anecdote number 36, which is titled On Column Writing. So anecdote number 36, which is titled On Column Writing, it's not a story. It's not a real story because as we know, amongst all these 50 or almost more than 50 short anecdotes that Sudha Murty is giving us, in these anecdotes, there are a few, just a couple or maybe just 3 or 4 more essays or topics which are not inspired from her real life, which are not real anecdotes from her life. So one such chapter is chapter number 36, which is titled On Column Writing. This is basically what Sudha Murty is trying to do in this is, she's trying to explain her experiences as a writer, as someone who used to write columns for newspaper, right? And in this particular chapter, she will talk about her experience as a writer and what makes her write and why she writes, okay, why she is a writer. So in this short article, I would call it an article rather than a story. So in this article, Sudha Murty does not describe any story or any real incident from her life, right? But rather she's explaining and she's explaining her experience as a writer. So this particular chapter, that is chapter number 36, is different from all the other chapters because it is not a story or an anecdote from her real life, rather it is an experience, and she's basically, it's like a manifesto. Sudha Murty is giving a manifesto on what makes her write, why does she write, and how, what is the creative process, how does she write, right? So it is her own experience as a writer that she's describing in these lines. So she talks about, and she tells the importance of everyday things in her life and the importance of everyday events in constructing her stories, her novels, her column writing, her newspaper writing, or anything of that sort. So this particular chapter can also explain how a writer's work, how what is the creative process behind a writer. So she basically talks about the importance of using everyday events and everyday happenings, everyday experiences rather, from her life in this chapter. Sudha Murty was also a teacher, by the way, and therefore she says that she always used to take examples to make the subjects clearer for the students. She explains why she writes things, from her everyday life. So these are the lines that I'm reading. By these lines, the reader will get an idea, the viewers will get an idea, about her creative process. So as you can see on the screen, she says that as a teacher, and I'm quoting, I am always aware that analogies is an example, make the subject clear. So when I write, I narrate some of my experiences, might have happened in my own family or among my friends, but it is not to highlight what my son said or how my friend spoke. I write only to share those few everyday moments, something that my readers can identify with, unquote. So, she talks about how both good and bad things can also become subject matter for literature. So both tragedy and comedy can be a good subject matter in life, to write about one's lives, because we have good experiences as well as we have bad experiences. Now look at these lines again that Sudha Murty says. She says, it is the duty of a writer to portray that the negative is also a part of life and that we should accept it as such while also thinking positively. So therefore, Sudha Murty says that she writes to narrate an incident so that her readers will be able to, associate with that incident. So her sole interest is in narrating her life experiences because as a philanthropist, as a teacher, as a traveler, as an entrepreneur, as a philanthropist, basically, she has met a variety of people all over the world, and even within her own country. And she has seen so much more about life than any one of us, right? So therefore this article is Sudha Murty's own manifesto of why she writes and how she writes and what is her aim in writing any particular book. So story number 36 is definitely this article rather, article number 36 is definitely important, to explain her intentions as a writer. Next comes anecdote number 37, which is titled Nobel Prize. So in this story, Sudha Murty talks about, a very basic thing in life, that no such thing is good or bad, but rather it's our intentions which makes things bad. So she says that she takes up the old argument that Alfred Nobel was the one who invented dynamite, and he made huge amount of money by inventing dynamite, and dynamite has been used for terrorism since so long, right? So there are people who criticize Alfred Nobel for inventing dynamite and making a huge amount of money by selling dynamite. But Sudha Murty says that this entire argument is it's completely useless. This entire argument is wrong, because that is a very wrong way of looking at Alfred Nobel, because he has instituted the Nobel Prize and then he has done so much philanthropy, that how can we say that Alfred Nobel was someone who made money through wrong means? Perhaps this would be wrong to say, right? So Sudha Murty says that dynamites can be used for creating for spreading terrorism, but at the same time dynamites have been so helpful for humans, because it has helped in creating roads in places where there were mountains, or perhaps in the mountainous areas, to create roads for infrastructure development, for also the infrastructure development of cities as well as for the mountainous regions, and then for making railways. This has been very useful. So we just cannot downgrade the importance of dynamites just because some people have used it for negative means. At the same time, the knives in our kitchen is also used to eat, to cut fruits and vegetables, to sustain ourselves, to give us nutrition, and at the same time the knife can also be used to kill someone mercilessly, right? So the idea is that dynamite, because she was using the idea of dynamite, she says that it helps in making roads, in cutting mountains, and improving the quality of humans' life, right? But then if someone uses dynamite for war, then how can we criticize Alfred Nobel for it? So therefore the idea is that it is on us, who are the humans, it is on us, as a society, whether we should use something in a constructive way or in a destructive way, right? Then we have topic number 38, which is titled Unwed Mothers. So this is a tragic story about the difference in which certain people look at women in India and in Norway, right? So basically this is a story about a woman who lived in India, and then she got pregnant outside marriage, without marriage, and then her family members and the society, they were because it is considered a taboo, and therefore she was ignored by the society. She was she had to suffer a lot of humiliation for this mistake of hers. Of course it was a mistake, but it was not a fatal mistake in any way. And then ultimately the girl had to commit suicide, because she could not handle the pains. She could not handle the shame of being pregnant outside her marriage, without her marriage, and therefore she commits suicide. So this is patriarchal prejudice at its worst. This is what Sudha Murty is trying to say. But then Sudha Murty gives the story of another woman, who is living in Norway, and she was also pregnant. But then the difference between these two cultures, and how in Norway it was not looked upon as a taboo. It was a mistake, but then the woman in Norway, she realizes her mistake, she owns it, she accepts it, but then the society does not force her to commit suicide, or the society does not humiliate her the way it is done in India. So the idea is that Sudha Murty is just trying to tell us the difference in cultures. So so Martha, the woman, she does not, she there is a woman, her name is Martha, and she introduces Sudha Murty to her cousin Mary, who was a young girl of about 24 years of age, but then she also had a son, right? So Mary did not commit a suicide, but the poor girl here in India, and her name was Kusuma, she was completely dead now. So because sexuality is considered as a big taboo in Eastern cultures, particularly in India, and therefore many times it can lead to big problems and big tragedies due to a small mistake in life. So of course it was a mistake for the girl to do this, and then she was even abandoned. But then perhaps the one who is at a larger fault is the society. It's the parents, the family, who could not console the girl and Kusum, and then ultimately she had to commit suicide, and it was a tragic end. So therefore this is a story about the difference of cultural situation in India and Norway. So this is story number 38. Let me now come to story number 39, which is titled Alliances Are Invited. So this is a story about matrimonial advertisements and weddings, and therefore the name is Alliances Are Invited. So basically Sudha Murty gives an experience of her friend Vanita. 30 years ago, her friend Vanita gave a matrimonial column in a newspaper in the Hindu. So in this advertisement, a lot of stress was given on how Vanita will be able to live in a joint family. She is willing to become a housewife, and she knows embroidery, she knows knitting, and she prefers a groom from the same community, and horoscope matching is also something which is very much required, right? So then 30 years later, it is Vanita's daughter Vani who is now getting married 30 years later. But look at the difference between the advertisement for Vani. So in this advertisement 30 years later, there was no mention of horoscopes. Rather, it was mentioned that horoscopes are not required, and then it was also mentioned that she would prefer a nuclear family, and that she would she enjoys Western music and traveling, and she would want a smaller family. So Vanita lives in a large space, in a what you can say, in a joint family kind of a space. But then Vani, she prefers nuclear families, and nuclear families and small families. So the idea is that how cultures have changed over a period of time. So this 25-30 years gap, so a huge difference has come up in the culture of India. So the difference between a mother's matrimonial alliance and the same mother's daughter's matrimonial alliance 25-30 years later. So it talks about the change in culture, the huge gap that has changed so much between the mother's advertisement and the daughter's advertisement. So it's a very light-hearted story, but at the same time it's a provocative story, because it talks about how 25 years ago marriages were conducted, and a lot has changed, right? So and in fact, I would digress a bit to tell you that in India, marriage advertisements talk a lot about society than any amount of academic papers or sociological research or anthropological research can do. So even today, the readers, while watching this video, they should take a break off, and they should try to look at some of the matrimonial advertisements. So they will realize that even today a lot of it is happening, though things have changed definitely due to the onset of modernity and the cosmopolitan nature of our lives in cities like Delhi. But if you go to several other places, you will find that these problems still persist, right? So if one can look up for these marriage advertisements in Marriage Bureau or in several matrimonial sites or even newspaper, this can tell us a lot about our society rather than any academic research or any professor or any researcher or academic papers presented in conferences can. So this is the idea, right? Because the advertisements for marriage are also a reflection of the society that we are living, right? So things have changed, people have become more open, people have become more inclusive today, more aware, but still things are very much similar. So this is story number 39. Now we have story number 40, which is titled A Willing Candidate. So it's a very important story, a very useful story that perhaps all of these, the viewers can learn. The students, definitely the students, right? It's a very useful life lesson that Sudha Murty is trying to give us. I would say it's a story which every new job candidate, anyone who's trying to apply for a job, because for obviously few years down the line, the viewers watching this lecture, or perhaps the students of the University of Delhi for whom I'm creating these lectures, so these students will also become aspirants now. They will be also looking for jobs, and they will be looking going to the job arena. So it is basically a story that all of these students can take benefit from, right? It's a story about people who are always willing to learn and to win in difficult battles, and that is what makes us better human beings, right? That is what makes us competitive, right? So perhaps reading this story can give us great insights about how one's attitude in life should be, particularly the ones who are going for their professional services. So in this story, Sudha Murty goes to a selection committee to recruit software engineers for a small firm, and then a young boy comes to give interview. So when Murty asked him how much time he would require to learn a new computer language, because this is an IT firm where he has been applying, so the boy says that I won't take more than 6 months, and he says that very confidently, right? So and he says that with a good amount of confidence. So then her mind takes her back several years later to Bombay, when she met a similar boy who was full of confidence, and he was willing to improve himself and even do better. So this boy finally got the job. despite not having a computer and an IT background, but he was more than willing to learn the job and to do better. So Sudha Murty tells us that, you know, this young boy, over a period of time, he became highly successful and he was doing good as well. So there are people who want to get good jobs, but they don't want to improve rather. And then there are people like the one who got the job, who is willing to do good, who is willing to learn, and despite being in a difficult situation, he's willing to trump over it. He's willing to learn computer languages, something which he has not done. He did not even have an IT background. So all of us, the idea is, the moral is that all of us should try to become better versions of ourselves, even if the situation or the tide is rising against us. So that is story number 40. I'll stop the lecture here. I'll take 11 more stories are left. So I'll be taking these 11 stories in the next subsequent 2 lectures. So that is till, that is the lecture till story number 40. Please wait for more lectures. I'll be coming up with more anecdotes, and then I'll also be taking up a detailed thematic analysis. I'll be also picking up and giving my analysis of some of the major themes that are there in this particular book, Wise and Otherwise by Sudha Murty. I hope that till now the readers have gained multiple perspectives about life in general and about how to become wise and how to avoid being otherwise. So that's the title of the story, Wise and Otherwise, because it shows the various aspects of humans. It shows the various, perspectives of humans, the various sides of humans. Some are wise, some are not, but then we should always strive to become wise, and more so by learning from other people's wisdom, and particularly in this case by learning from Sudha Murty's wisdom, because she is a woman of the world. She has traveled the world, she has seen the world, and perhaps her experiences can teach us a lot. Right? So this is the idea. So thank you so much for tuning in with me. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patient listening. I'll come up with multiple lectures on this topic in the subsequent parts. Thank you. Goodbye for now.